My name is Donny, and I am 75 years old. I live alone in a wooden house on the edge of a quiet African town. When the wind blows through the open fields, it carries with it the scent of dust, rain, and something else. Memories. The kind that never fade, even when the body grows old. Every morning begins the same. I wake up before the sun, when the sky is still half asleep. The crickets are quiet now, and the roosters stretch their necks as if testing their voices for the day ahead. I sit on the edge of my bed for a while, letting my old bones remember what standing feels like. Then I take my cane, my cup of tea, and step out onto the porch. The world at dawn is gentle. The trees are silhouettes painted against a golden sky, and the mist hangs low over the fields like a tired blanket. From here I can see the town far away. The tin roofs, the narrow roads, the people starting their day. And for a moment I imagine that my wife, Amina, is still alive, sitting beside me, humming softly as she used to. Sometimes I can almost hear her voice in the rustle of the leaves. She's been gone 8 years now, but her presence never really left this house. Her photo still hangs on the wall next to our sons. Our son, David, my pride, my joy, my sorrow. You see, I raised him with my own 2 hands. There were no riches in my youth, only determination. I sold firewood on the roadside. I fixed broken shoes with borrowed tools, and every night, when my body ached, I would still sit by the lamp and teach David to read. Education will be your wings, my boy, I used to tell him. And one day you'll fly beyond the clouds. He did. He flew far, maybe too far. Now he lives in New York City. He runs companies, owns buildings, and speaks with that fast city accent that people there have. He calls sometimes, not often, and every month he sends me $7,000 through my caretaker, Clara. A good woman, honest, kind, respectful. She cooks for me, cleans the house, and always greets me with a smile that tries to hide her pity, but money cannot talk. Money cannot laugh. Money cannot say, "I love you, Papa." Every time I see Clara counting those bills on the table, I feel both proud and hollow. Proud because my son made it. Hollow because he forgot what matters most. That morning the air was soft. The smell of mangoes drifted in from the neighbor's tree. Clara brought my breakfast. Porridge with milk, a few slices of mango, and steaming tea in a chipped white cup. She set it down gently and said, "Happy Father's Day, Papa Samuel." I smiled. "Father's Day?" She nodded. "Yes, it's Sunday, remember?" I laughed softly. These days come and go like passing clouds. Every day feels the same when you grow old. Before I could take a sip of tea, my old phone, the one with buttons, began to ring. The screen blinked. David. My hands trembled. I hadn't heard his voice in months. I pressed the green button. My son." "Happy Father's Day, Papa," he said. His voice was bright, strong, confident, the voice of a man who had conquered the world. "Do you like the $7,000 Clara gives you every month?" That question, it struck me like a gentle blade. He said it with love, maybe pride, but it carried something cold underneath. I looked around my small home, the same house where he learned to write, to dream, to pray. I saw the old chalk marks on the wall from the day he wrote his name for the first time. "Yes, my son," I said quietly. "It helps me live well." "Thank you," he laughed. "Good, Papa." "I'm glad. I'll visit soon, maybe next year." And then the line went silent. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. The tea had gone cold, but I didn't notice. My eyes wandered to the wall, where a photograph hung. It was me, Amina, and little David. He was smiling in that photo, a smile that could light up a whole room. I whispered to the picture. "My boy's rich now, Amina, but he has no time for his father." The clock ticked. The world outside kept moving, but inside, time stood still. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind howled softly through the broken window. I thought about the first time David told me he wanted to go abroad. He was only 17, but his eyes burned with ambition. He promised to return one day, to build me a big house, to take care of me. And now, all I have is his promise, floating in the air like a ghost. That night, as I lay on my narrow bed, I kept my eyes on the ceiling. The rain had started again, soft at first, like fingers tapping gently on a drum. The smell of wet earth filled the room, and I closed my eyes. Memories came like waves, some gentle, some heavy enough to drown me. I remembered Amina, my wife, Her laughter, her eyes, the way she'd tie her scarf when she was busy. She was the light in every dark place I ever knew. She never raised her voice, but when she spoke, even the wind would pause to listen. We met in the market. I was selling handmade shoes under a broken umbrella. She was buying vegetables. She laughed when I dropped my tools, and that laughter, it stayed with me for years. We married a year later, under the shade of the mango tree behind my father's house. No gold, no big party, just promises and the belief that love could build what money couldn't. When David was born, the world felt brand new. He came into our lives like sunlight through an open window. I still remember holding him for the first time, his tiny hands wrapping around my finger. In that moment I made a silent vow. This boy will have a better life than I did, and so began the years of struggle. I worked every job I could find, fixing bicycles, carrying bricks, polishing old shoes. At night when the power would go out, I'd sit by candlelight and tell him stories. Stories about pilots, doctors, explorers, men who had dreams bigger than their villages. Amina would listen quietly, smiling, sometimes adding her gentle voice, "Dream, my son, but don't forget where your roots are." That was her gift, to dream, but stay grounded. When David turned 12, I saved enough to send him to a city school. Every month I'd travel 3 hours by bus just to pay his fees in person. I'd hand over those crumpled notes to the principal with pride, knowing each coin carried my sweat. David would hug me before I left. "I'll make you proud, Papa," he'd say, and he did. He studied hard. He earned scholarships. Eventually, a letter came from a university in America. I remember the day clearly. He ran to me, waving that letter like a flag of victory. I was fixing a broken chair in the yard. He shouted, "Papa, I got it!" "I'm going to America." I froze. Half of me was filled with joy. The other half, fear. Fear that once he crossed that ocean, the distance would do what time alone could not. Separate us. Amina held my hand and said, "Let him go, Samuel. Let him chase his dreams. You gave him wings and now let him fly." So we sold what little we had. Our cow, the old sewing machine, even Amina's wedding cloth. All so he could buy a ticket. One ticket to a future we would never see. When he left, the house felt emptier than ever. Amina would sit by the window watching every airplane that passed above. She'd whisper, "Maybe that's our David." Even when it wasn't, her eyes would fill with hope. Years went by. He called less and less, but when he did, his voice sounded older, busier, different. He began to say words I didn't understand. Stocks, clients, deadlines. He'd tell me, "Papa, you wouldn't understand. It's business." And I would just nod, pretending I did. Then one day, Amina fell sick. It started with coughs, then fevers, then silence. Doctors came and went, each leaving behind new prescriptions and lost hope. I sent message after message to David, "Your mother is unwell, please come." He didn't come. He said he had meetings, deadlines, people to see. Amina passed away on a Tuesday afternoon, just before the rains came. At her funeral, I looked at the empty space beside me where David should have stood. And I whispered into the wind, "She waited for you, my son." Until her last breath, she waited. After that, the calls became fewer. The $7,000 transfers began. And Clara appeared, a quiet, kind girl who reminded me of Amina when she was young. She said David had hired her to take care of me. That was when I realized I was now a responsibility, not a father. Sometimes at night I walk around the house and talk to the walls. They remember more than people do. Each crack holds a story. Where Amina dropped a bowl, where David drew on the wall, where I leaned after long days of work. I run my fingers along those cracks, and it feels like touching the veins of my own heart. Last week, Clara found me sitting in the dark. She asked, "Papa Samuel, are you all right?" I smiled faintly. "I was just thinking, child, about how life gives you everything, and still somehow takes it all away." She looked at me for a moment and said, "You gave life everything you had, Papa. Maybe that's what love really is, giving without keeping." Her words settled in my chest like warm coals. The next morning, the air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. I sat by the window, my cane leaning against the chair, watching the mist rise from the fields. Clara had gone to the market early. leaving behind the sound of a ticking clock and the faint hum of a distant radio. The quietness in this house has a sound of its own, like the echo of footsteps from memories that refused to fade. I took a sip of cold tea and whispered to the empty room, "Amina, do you see him now? Our boy, so far away, so full of life, yet empty where it matters most. Sometimes I wonder if the dead can hear the living. Because if they can, she must hear how my voice trembles whenever I say our son's name." 2 days after Father's Day, Clara brought me an envelope. "It came by courier, Papa Samuel," she said. It had my name written neatly, Mr. Samuel Osei. The handwriting wasn't David's. Inside was a letter. It was from one of David's assistants in New York. She wrote, "Mr. Osei, your son wanted me to send you this package. He's been busy traveling, but he often talks about you. He says he owes his success to your sacrifices." At the bottom of the envelope, I found a new phone, a sleek, modern thing, and a note that read, "Papa, I bought you this, so we can video call anytime. I'll call soon. Love, David." I turned the phone over in my hands, staring at my own reflection on its black screen. For a moment I could see the boy he once was, smiling, curious, full of dreams. And behind that reflection I saw myself, older, smaller, fading. Clara helped me set it up. Every evening after that, I would sit by the window, waiting for his call. Each night I would charge the phone, clean my glasses, and rehearse what I'd say when he finally appeared on the screen. But he never called. Days turned to weeks. One afternoon, Clara brought the mail again. This time it wasn't a package. It was a magazine. David's photo was on the cover. The headline read, "The Man Who Built an Empire from Nothing." He looked powerful, confident, the kind of man people respect. Behind him was a glass building that touched the clouds. I traced his face with my finger and smiled softly. "Yes, my boy, you built an empire." But I wondered, did he know the walls of that empire were built from his father's worn-out hands? That night I couldn't sleep. The magazine lay on my bedside table, staring at me like an open wound. I thought about the time David was 12 and built a kite from an old newspaper. He ran through the field behind our house, shouting, "Papa, look, it's flying." I had clapped so hard that my palms stung. Now I realized he's still flying, only higher. But like that kite, the higher he goes, the thinner the string becomes, and I am the one still holding it. Weeks passed. The rain stopped, and the season changed. I began to fall sick more often. Clara would bring me warm soup and sit beside me, reading the Bible aloud. Her voice soothed the air, like soft wind through dry grass. One day I asked her, "Clara, do you think David prays?" She smiled gently. "Maybe in his own way, Papa. Maybe his prayers are made of work and numbers instead of words." I chuckled weakly. "If that's true, I hope God speaks the language of numbers then." She laughed, and for a moment so did I. But deep down, something in my chest felt heavier than usual. That night, I dreamed again. I was young and David was still a child. We were walking through the forest, his small hand in mine. He stopped and looked up at me. "Papa," he said, "what happens when people forget each other?" I didn't have an answer in the dream, and when I woke, the question still lingered in the air. The next morning, Clara came running to my porch. Her face was bright, her eyes wide. "Papa Samuel," she said, breathless. "Your son, he's calling." I froze. She handed me the phone, her fingers trembling with excitement. On the screen, his face appeared, older, sharper, but still my boy. "Papa," he said, smiling. "You see me? Can you hear me?" For a second I couldn't speak. Tears blurred my vision. "I see you, my son," I said, voice shaking. "I see you," he laughed nervously. "You look good, Papa. I'm glad Clara's taking care of you." We talked for a while, about the house, the garden, even about the mango tree that still stood strong. But something felt missing. His eyes darted around me. He was looking but not seeing. He smiled, but not from the heart. Then, halfway through the call, he looked serious. "Papa," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe you could move here. I'll get you the best care, the best house, everything." I smiled sadly. "My son," I said, "if I leave this house, who will remember the stories in these walls? Who will talk to your mother's picture? Who will wait under the mango tree when you visit?" He fell silent, And then, for the first time in years, I saw guilt in his eyes. "Papa," he whispered. "I'm sorry." But before he could say more, the screen froze. The connection dropped, and I was left staring at my reflection again. I sat there in silence. The world outside was calm, painted in gold and shadow. Somewhere in the distance, a bird sang, soft and slow like a lullaby for a tired heart. I closed my eyes and said softly, "It's all right, my son. Love doesn't need a signal. It finds its way even through silence." Weeks turned into months. Clara still came every morning, bringing tea and stories from the village. Sometimes she'd read me the newspaper, even though my eyes were too weak to see the small letters. One evening, as the rain poured heavily on the tin roof, Clara rushed in, holding an envelope in her hand. "Papa Samuel, it's from David." My heart trembled. My hands shook as I took the letter. The paper smelled faintly of cologne. Expensive, foreign, unfamiliar. I opened it slowly, my old fingers tracing the neat handwriting. It said, "Dear Papa, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. Life in New York is fast, too fast. I work, I sleep, I work again. But every night when I close my eyes, I see the mango tree, the old house, and you sitting on the porch. I'm sorry for the years I missed. I'm coming home next month. I've bought a ticket. Please wait for me. Your son David." Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you." For the next few days I couldn't sleep. Clara cleaned the house, repainted the porch, and fixed the small wooden gate that had broken years ago. I polished the old teacups Amina had loved, just so I could serve David when he came. Each morning, I watched the road that led from the town to my home. Every sound, every car made my heart leap. Then one morning Clara received a call. Her face went pale. She handed me the phone slowly. "Papa, it's from New York." A man's voice spoke, calm but distant. "Mr. Osei, I'm calling from the embassy. I'm sorry to inform you that your son David Osei passed away last night in a car accident." The words hit me like thunder. The world went silent. The room spun around me. I don't remember falling, but I remember Clara screaming, holding me in her arms. For 3 days, I said nothing. I didn't eat. I didn't move. I only stared at the letter on the table, the letter that promised his return. On the 4th morning, I walked outside. The sky was gold again. The wind carried the same scent of dust and rain. I sat on the porch, closed my eyes, and whispered, "My boy kept his promise." He came home, just not the way I hoped. A single tear rolled down my cheek. That night, I dreamed of David again, running barefoot under the mango tree, laughing, calling out, "Papa, catch me if you can." And in that dream, I ran after him. I wasn't old anymore. My knees were strong, my heart was full, and the world was light again. When I woke up, I smiled, because I knew deep inside that one day soon, I would see my boy again, not in dreams, but beyond the sun. After that night, something inside me became quiet. Not broken, just peaceful. I stopped counting the days, stopped waiting for footsteps on the road. Instead, I sat under the mango tree every evening and spoke to both Amina and David in my prayers. Clara worried about me. She would say, "Papa, you need to eat. You need strength." I would smile and reply, "My strength now comes from memories, my child." One morning, about 2 weeks after the news, Clara came running to me, her face full of confusion. "Papa Samuel, there's a package for you. From New York." My hands trembled as I unwrapped it. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with African patterns, the kind only David would know I loved. There was also a note. It read, "To my father, in case I never make it home, please open this. You once told me, a son's success means nothing if his father cannot share the sunset with him. I bought something that belongs to you, Papa, something that should always have been yours." Inside the box, there were property papers, ownership documents for the very house I was living in. The one I built with sweat and pain, but had long lost to debts years ago. David had secretly bought it back in my name. There was also a small voice recorder. I pressed play, and there it was, his voice. "Papa, if you're hearing this, I guess time didn't let me reach you. I'm sorry, but I want you to know something. Every deal I made, every meeting, every dollar, I was chasing your dream. The one you planted in me when I was a boy fixing shoes beside you. I never forgot you, Papa. I just didn't know how to face the years I missed. Please forgive me. I love you. More than all the money, more than New York, more than this world. The recorder clicked off. And for the first time in years I cried, not out of sorrow, but out of love so deep it could move mountains. Clara placed her hand gently on my shoulder and whispered, "He loved you, Papa, he really did." That evening, I asked Clara to bring 2 cups of tea. I placed one beside me, for David, and the other for myself. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of rain. I lifted my cup and said, "To you, my son. You came home after all." Weeks passed and my health began to fade. My body grew weaker, but my heart was light. I often dreamed of a road covered in golden light, leading toward the sound of laughter. One morning, Clara found me sitting under the mango tree, a faint smile on my face, the letter and the recorder beside me. I had gone quietly, as if walking into that sunrise I had always spoken of. Clara buried me next to Amina, under the same tree where David once played. She planted new flowers there and placed the recorder in my hands, and every evening when the wind passes through the fields, the people of the village say they can still hear a soft voice, a father and a son laughing together under the mango tree. Years passed after Papa Samuel's passing, but his house remained standing, quiet, warm and full of stories. The mango tree outside grew taller, its roots spreading deep like the memory of the man who once sat beneath it every day. Clara had stayed. She couldn't leave, not after everything she had witnessed. She kept the house clean, watered the plants, and spoke to Samuel's grave every morning before work. "Good morning, Papa," she would say softly. "The world is changing fast, but your tree still gives shade." She was no longer the same young caretaker who came just to earn a living. Samuel had changed her, taught her about patience, love, and what it truly means to care. One afternoon, a foreign car pulled up on the dusty road. A man stepped out wearing sunglasses and holding a small boy's hand. He looked lost, not in direction but in time. "Excuse me," he said. "Is this the Osei residence?" Clara froze. The man looked exactly like David, only younger. "Yes," she whispered. "You must be—" He smiled sadly. "David Jr., I'm Samuel's grandson." Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't known Samuel's family would ever come back. David Jr. explained that he had found old letters and recordings from his father, the ones Samuel had never received. Those messages spoke of regret, love, and the promise to one day return. "I wanted to see the home my father and grandfather built," he said, "to understand them." Clara invited him in. The air inside still smelled of tea leaves and old wood. The same photograph hung on the wall, Samuel, Amina, and little David. David Jr. stood there for a long time, staring at the faces. He finally turned to Clara and asked, "What kind of man was my grandfather?" She smiled, her voice trembling. "He was the kind of man who could turn silence into music and pain into peace. He didn't die with anger, he left with love." Later that evening they sat beneath the mango tree. The sunset painted the world in soft golden light, the same glow Samuel had always loved. David Jr. placed a small box on the ground and said, "I brought something." Inside the box was a modern tablet, glowing softly. He tapped the screen and suddenly Samuel's voice filled the air, the recording David had left behind. "Papa, I never forgot you. I love you." The sound echoed through the quiet fields. Clara closed her eyes, smiling as the little boy, Samuel's great-grandson, started laughing, chasing butterflies under the same tree where his grandfather once played. "Look at him," Clara said, tears in her eyes. "He's just like your father, just like your grandfather." David Jr. nodded. "Then this house will stay. I'll restore it, not as a property but as a memory, a place where love never left." Clara placed her hand over his. "That's what Samuel would have wanted." And as the evening wind blew through the leaves, carrying the scent of tea and old wood, Clara felt a warmth, the same warmth she once felt when Papa Samuel smiled. From that day onward, people who passed by that house didn't call it the Osei home. They called it the house that waited. Because no matter how far life takes a son, a father's love always finds its way home. Months passed after David Jr. restored the Osei home. The walls were repainted, the roof fixed, and the garden bloomed again. But one thing remained untouched: Samuel's old wooden chair on the porch. David Jr. often sat there in silence, sipping tea like his grandfather once did. He began writing in a notebook notes about Samuel's life, his struggles, and the voice recordings Clara had shared. One evening, while watching the sunset, he said to Clara, "People need to hear this story, my grandfather's story, not as a tale of loss, but as a lesson in love." Clara smiled. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "Tell it with your heart, not your camera." He nodded. Weeks later, David Jr. started filming, capturing the wooden porch, the mango tree, the golden sky, and the empty cup Samuel once held. The world would soon know the name Samuel Osei. The film, titled Papa Samuel, premiered online. It was simple, just real voices, real letters, and real places. But something magical happened. Millions of people watched it within days. They cried, shared, and wrote comments like, "This made me call my father after 10 years. I wish I had one more day with my dad." Money fades. Time doesn't return. David Jr. sat in silence, scrolling through the flood of messages. For the first time, he felt peace, as if his father's and grandfather's souls were finally connected through his work. That night, he dreamt of Samuel again, sitting on the porch, smiling with the same warmth. "You did well, my son's son," the old man said softly. "You found the wings I left behind." Weeks turned into months. David Jr. began receiving handwritten letters from around the world, from old men, young fathers, and even children. One letter stood out. It came from a young woman in Ghana who wrote, "Your grandfather's story made me forgive my own father. We spoke again after years. Thank you for reminding me that love never expires." David Jr. read that line again and again. He realized his grandfather's story was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who ever waited, hoped, or forgave. A year later, David Jr. and Clara stood together as a crowd gathered under the mango tree. It was now Father's Day, and they had organized a small event, a day for fathers who waited. Children read letters aloud. Wives shared stories, and elderly men spoke about the sons they missed. Clara looked at David Jr. and whispered, "He'd be proud, you know." David smiled. "No, Clara, he is proud." They placed flowers on Samuel's grave, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. The boy, now a little older, placed his small hand on the headstone and said, "Great Grandpa, thank you for the house that waited for us." Years later, the film Papa Samuel was adapted into a global documentary titled Wings of the Sky. It won awards, but more importantly, it healed hearts. In interviews, David Jr. always said the same words. "My grandfather taught me something simple. You don't measure love in money, but in moments." He often visited the same porch whenever he returned to Ghana. The house was now a small museum, filled with Samuel's belongings, his photo and recordings. And every evening, as the sky turned golden, David Jr. would sit in that same chair, whispering the same prayer his grandfather once did. "Thank you for giving me the wings to come home." Decades later, Clara, now an old woman herself, sat outside the same porch looking at the horizon. The house had become a place of pilgrimage. People came from far away just to sit under that mango tree. As she watched the sunset, she smiled softly and said, "Papa Samuel, they kept your promise. The house never stopped waiting." She closed her eyes, feeling the golden warmth of evening light on her face. And for a moment, it felt as if Samuel himself was sitting beside her, sipping tea in silence. In the distance, laughter of children filled the air. Generations had changed, but love hadn't, because in that small wooden home, one truth lived forever. A father never truly dies. He just becomes the wind that guides his children home. If this story touched your heart, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever missed your father or child like this? Subscribe to Grandpha Tales for more heartfelt stories every week. Your support keeps these stories